Saddle up your horses.
Pitter patter, let's get at her. It is another episode of the Manely Broncos Podcast, and it is our first victory podcast of the season. We get the chance to talk about a Broncos W, but also some disappointing stuff in terms of a roster move or positive, depending on which way you actually want to look at it. So
I'm going to go with surprising.
That. Yeah, surprising is probably the best way to put it. But of course, we also are going to be talking about New York Jets, the New York Jets preview, of course. And what better person to talk about the New York Jets than a guy that has actually been on our show before previously. He's a tremendous guy. His name is Scott Mason. He is a host of Play Like a Jet, and we like to do a quid pro quo thing. We like to appear on his Play Like a Jet podcast, and he likes to appear on ours. He is one of a kind, and yes, we actually like to keep his name in our mouths when we talk about him. So we like to do that. So
is this an inside joke that I don't understand?
No, of course not. No, but Scott Mason joins the show. How are you doing, man? I felt like, what's the best way to introduce this? Because obviously the Jets and the Broncos had so much off season. So what's the best way to possibly introduce this? So, but anyway, Scott, thank you so much, man, for hopping on with this. It is absolutely a blast to get the chance to do this with you.
Yeah, likewise, gentlemen. Always a pleasure to come on and talk some Jets Broncos. I'll tell you this. I don't know what's going to happen with the Jets this week. I don't know what's going on with any of the players in terms of what they're thinking internally. But what I can tell you is that none of them are going to say what Evan Neal just said. So that's a positive for sure.
That is absolutely a positive for sure. Before we dive, obviously, into that, it would be fitting to at least, that we talk about the positive, of course, on the Broncos side of things, and that being a victory. They got the very first victory over the Chicago Bears. It didn't really start all that well. It actually started very much, like the game previously, should I say, with the Miami Dolphins, where, one, aside from the fact that Tua Tagovailoa and Justin Fields both completed 16 passes. They were both 16 of 16 at one point. And if I'm not mistaken, the lone incompletion that was actually happening from that first half was the Hail Mary that Fields threw at the end of the game, or at the end of the half. But it was a rather flawless first half for the Bears and for the Dolphins. But things were a little bit different in the second half. The Broncos willed itself to a come-from-behind victory. Since you're our guest, Scott, and I know you're a Jets guy, but when you actually get a chance to watch some of that game or get a chance to look at some of that game, what were some of your takeaways?
Well, as much as I hate to give Sean Payton credit for anything, I think what he's done with the offense has been pretty good. I mean, look, the offense was a complete mess last year. I don't need to tell you guys that. And Russell Wilson looked like a guy that you were going to want to punt to the moon. But this year, not that he's been the Russell Wilson of old, but he's looked a lot better. That offense has been a lot more efficient. And obviously, the fact that they were down 28-7 and fought back and were able to win 31-28 says a lot about where they're at right now, especially when they were 0-3. They could have easily folded up and quit. The defense is still a big problem, which I'm hoping the Jets can cash in on this Sunday. But I thought overall it was a positive performance for the Broncos, particularly on offense. Like I said, Russell Wilson has not been anywhere near what he was with the Seahawks. But if you're a Broncos fan, you got to be happy with the progress that's been made with him. He's played at a much higher level under Sean Payton than he did last year under Nathaniel Hackett. Now, how much of that is Sean Payton? How much of that is Nathaniel Hackett? That's a question for the players and the other coaches. But I think if you're a Broncos fan, you have to be encouraged because at least temporarily they kept the season alive by coming back and winning that game 31-28. Although, obviously, the defense getting shredded by Justin Fields at least for the first half of the game, not so encouraging. That defense, boy, that's so far been very bad. But better football this year than last year, at least.
Absolutely. What about you, Brandon?
Can we just talk about how weird it is that the Denver Broncos games seem to be shadowing or mirroring whatever happens with CU? You have the CU Oregon game. Like, I'm dead serious. You have the CU Oregon game that Saturday, and CU just gets absolutely boat raced. And then the next Sunday, the next day, is the Broncos Miami game. Need I say more? And then this week, you had CU USC, where USC absolutely just trounced us in the first half. I don't know, Scott, if you watched that at all. I don't know if you follow how much you follow college.
Yep.
It's hard to miss Colorado right now with Coach Prime.
Yeah.
It just like absolutely destroyed CU in the first half. And even though we won, like Caleb Williams had 6 touchdowns, that was insane. And then we came back in the second half, and we probably could have won that. Like when we had those 3 runs at the end of the game, back to back to back, where we ate up like 30 seconds of clock, I wanted to pull my hair out. But it was just kind of creepy how much they have mirrored each other so far. Because CU couldn't come back in the second half all the way to win it, but the Broncos could. It was kind of weird. Just thought I would point that out. But it was a game, man. That's by far the best I've ever seen Justin Fields look in the NFL as a passer, and that's saying something.
And they lost the game too. Yeah.
That's not good when you're talking about the defense. What
about you? Yeah, what about you, Matty? I know that you are like one of the people that are like, let's lose the rest of the games type of person, or but it's hard not to get excited about a game like that, right?
I mean, sure, one of the worst teams in football, and we're getting boat raced 28-7, and we end up coming back and winning the game. Like, yeah, that's great. I was looking on the timeline of jersey swap pictures of Caleb Williams rocking the blue and orange, and so you're talking about the guy that torched Colorado, but then everybody was like, maybe he's our savior next year in Colorado.
Just for 6 touchdown passes, he's going to be our quarterback.
Yeah, like let's do that. Sign me up for that. Instead, we go beat the Bears, who might be our greatest competition for a race to the bottom, alongside a team like Minnesota, who got a win, Carolina, who lost to Minnesota, but has no incentive to tank because they don't own their first round pick. So, like, there was a path. It was like, if we just lose this game, then we'll actually control our own destiny, so to speak. I'm a Thunder fan too, so I know what it looks like to increase your odds for a rebuild. And make no mistake about it, when you're fielding the 32nd ranked defense in football, you have a lot of work to do. Now, granted, the offense has moved mountains, pun intended, I guess, in the Rockies. But, man, I was having visions of like, okay, like this is where we're at. This is our life now. But it's all, I even tweeted, the last 7+ years will all be worth it if we get Caleb Williams. Now, like Ross and Friends says, we have to pivot. And now I'm like ready to drink the Kool-Aid again. If we beat the JETE Jets, then we'll be odds to the races and be excited for Thursday night football against the Chiefs next week. So there are a lot of points to talk about. If you want to be mad, you can be mad. If you want to be happy and drink the orange Kool-Aid, you could do that too. It's really a weird situation that Broncos country's in right now.
Well, now the Bears have the first pick and the second pick. So
as of right
go
now,
ahead and pair
yes.
Caleb Williams with Marvin Harrison Jr. and make me hate myself.
At least they'll be in the NFC.
Yeah, but I mean, I will say I do like the victory, and I was kind of in that Caleb Williams hype train for a little bit there. I'm not going to say it's over because nothing's ever over, but I think our offense is too good for that to, ironically, for that to happen. I feel like every time we've ever talked about this, it's always been, our defense is too good. And that saying our offense is too good kind of is freaky, but we might have one. I mean, obviously, you can make the argument, obviously, with the Dolphins game that was a record that is not one that we want to be setting here. But this might be one of the worst defenses of all time, which is just because, of course, it is, right?
Mhm.
Like, that was disgusting.
I mean, it's funny you talked about this, how the correlation is between Colorado and the Broncos. That particular game against the Bears, I would actually say was more reminiscent of the Rams and Bears game, or sorry, Rams and Buffs game. Like, that was more reminiscent of that one than it was, the
I don't know about that one, really, because
yes, I mean, in terms of coming back and actually winning,
USC,
I mean,
but USC was like, in terms of that, compare the first half of both the ECU game and the Broncos game,
right?
Similar.
But still, you're talking about USC is the top 10, like a top 10 team in the country, and
I guess that does make sense. Yeah, that's fair. That's a fair point.
Yeah,
in terms of like a quote unquote bad team. What the hell?
Can we talk for 2 seconds about a team that's way better than any of those teams you mentioned? Boomer Sooner, let's go. We're going to beat Texas. That's going to happen.
Right, well, as long as
and then offense and defense, two of our biggest impact players, one Nick Benito and Marvin Mims Jr., both Boomer Sooners that have made big impacts that potentially could be forcing other guys who have been on the team longer or made more money out the door. We already saw that with Randy Gregory, which I'm sure we'll get into in a little bit. Potentially another receiver could be on the trade block because of Marvin Mims' emergence. And it's just happening every week. So some of these young guys stepping up does give us room for hope moving forward. We're not necessarily in quicksand. There is progress being made.
Yeah. So, Scott,
who still doesn't get enough snaps.
So, Scott, you mentioned about Russell Wilson, and because it's important to lead off with that. And I know that you mentioned, and Matty mentioned about the Chicago Bears, but like I think that it's really important to and I also don't want to circle the Jets too much in this because we'll preview them in the Broncos game. But that's also the quarterback that they signed up for. So even though it was the Chicago Bears, and even though it was 28 points, I mean, that is kind of the quarterback you signed up for. And so any chance that you have of him to go and win you a football game, that's the kind of quarterback that you certainly signed up for and traded for. And so, so to kind of spin it a little bit to the Jets, and again, we'll talk about it from the Jets perspective, but I would venture to guess that, let's just say Russell Wilson does this against the Jets, and again, we'll preview the Jets game, but say he does something to this, liking against the Jets. Is that actually putting the world on notice more so than what we've seen the first handful of weeks? Because and I say that from the Jets defense perspective. Like, if he can be able to do that and the offense puts up 24 plus points, I would imagine that that's putting the NFL on notice, saying, hey, this offense actually is no joke.
Yeah, I think so. By the way, first of all, I got to just say this. Hook 'em. Sorry, Matty. I'm a Horns fan, so let's go Texas this Saturday. But yeah, no, I think if the Broncos can do this against a quality defense like the Jets, and look, we've talked about this on my show a lot. I think the Cowboys and the 49ers defenses are on a different level than everybody else. So the Jets defense is good. Top 5, top 10, somewhere in that range. So if the Broncos can do that against them as opposed to a bad Bears defense, I think then all of a sudden you could say, okay, this offense is starting to come together and might be for real. It'll be interesting because the Jet defense has done pretty well against every quarterback they've faced so far except for Dak Prescott. They really gave Josh Allen a big problem. Patrick Mahomes played really poorly. You guys saw that on Sunday night. Mac Jones wasn't very good. Mac Jones is pretty much never very good. But Dak Prescott was the one that did very well against the Jets. So if Russell Wilson can...
And Dak Prescott hasn't looked very good this year.
I mean, honestly, I think for the most part he's been fine. I think a lot of it's been overblown. And the Cowboys are obviously, look, at this point, and I mean we can get into this later if you want, but I feel like there's a handful of teams that are just a cut above everybody else, and the Cowboys are one of them.
Mhm.
And unfortunately for you guys, one of them is also in your division, Kansas City. Unfortunately for Jets fans, two of them are in the Jets division, that of course being the Dolphins and the Bills. But I think it's interesting because some of these teams, like the Dolphins, for example, really good offense, not a very good defense. So if the Broncos were to put up points against the Dolphins, which we know they didn't, or at least they gave up 70, so it wasn't really a contest, it's not the same as putting up points against the quality defense, which is part of why there is some optimism around Zach Wilson right now around these parts, because Zach Wilson did very well and had maybe the best game of his career against a very good Chiefs defense.
Yeah, and maybe the best team in football. I mean, that's exactly as far as a measuring stick that you want. In terms of, is Zach Wilson going to be the guy post Aaron Rodgers, or, and that's going to be a conversation too for another day, of course. Matty, you mentioned it. And of course, that is the main course of the show in terms of the Randy Gregory release. We didn't necessarily expect to have this conversation. It was a type of conversation that was, is this going to be happening? And I will say, I'm a big Randy Gregory fan. Everybody knows this, dating back to a certain college. That said, though, your best ability is availability. That's always going to be it. And I think for more importantly, the emergence of guys like Jonathan Cooper and Nick Bonito, especially, and even to circle back on the Chicago Bears, that was a massive game for Bonito. And especially when you kind of peel back the layers a little bit of Bonito and with the Broncos team, I believe it was, I noticed this on Twitter, and I got puzzled a little bit. And the more I dug deeper on it, it looked like the Broncos hired Nick Bonito, one of Nick Bonito's like linebacker coaches or pass rush specialists from Oklahoma, named Jamar Cain, who the Broncos hired. And I think it's worth mentioning this because Bonito is playing the best we've ever seen. And that's obviously dating back to the preseason and all that hype. And so that emergence and everything that we had seen there, that is definitely a cause for a lot of optimism. And it's maybe the reason, aside from availability, for Randy Gregory, why he is not on this team right now.
Yeah, and we went and dropped the bag on Randy Gregory's doorstep, fighting the Cowboys, taking out character clause issues and whatnot out of the contract in order to secure him, which should have been red flag number one, injuries being red flag number two. And we did that while saying, you know what, Vaughn, I know you want to come back. Thank you, but no thank you. And then he goes to Buffalo. So sorry, Jets. Is it Jets Nation? Is that what you refer to yourself as? What is the collective of Jets fans?
I guess you could say Jet Nation. I don't know. It's kind of a silly thing ultimately.
So Bills are stampeding at the airport and just handling business potentially with Von Miller in the future because we didn't want to bring back a legend and we wanted to go after Gregory. Like huge swing and miss, big time for Peyton, that being George Peyton. And like that could potentially be part of his undoing this offseason. I think he's very much on the hot seat to be moved. And it's one in a list of poor free agency moves, him swinging on guys that have been injured. Guys that have a history of being injured tend to continue to get injured. It just happens. Like you don't get less injured as you get older. That just doesn't typically happen. So I'm pretty frustrated with all that. It was a lot of dead money. It's like 17 million or something dead money this year, 16 point something, and another like 8 next year. So it's just really frustrating the way that shook out. But I guess it's good for the young guys behind him. I'm just very frustrated that we didn't bring Von Miller back. He could have been somebody who could have potentially anchored this defense in the waves that are going on with his veteran presence and his ability to win at the highest level. So a lot of these guys on our defense don't know how to win. Vaughn was one of the few that did. So that's frustrating.
Yeah, this Randy Gregory situation just adds gasoline to the fire that has already been stoked by a lot of people under Sean Payton's seat as GM of the Denver Broncos.
George
because
Payton.
What did I say? Sean Payton? George Payton.
Yeah, George Payton.
There's too many damn Paytons, man.
Payton.
George Payton as GM of our team, because I mean, you're totally right. Like this, you've already gone into, like, you've seen people kind of break out the receipts of, okay, well, George did this move and this move and this move, and they all sucked and they all like didn't work out, and this is on him, and they're not wrong. But you add into that the whole thing with Nathaniel Hackett and that hiring, current Jets offensive coordinator. Sorry, Scott. Which we'll get into. And then you just add insult to injury with the Randy Gregory deal. I mean, it's kind of funny. There was that whole arms race last year in the AFC West of like, oh, well, we're going to bring in Randy Gregory and give him this huge deal. And the Chargers are going to bring in JC Jackson and give him this huge deal. And then the Raiders are going to bring in pass rusher whose name I can't remember for some reason, that's been all over social media, and gave him
Chandler Jones.
Chandler Jones, thank you. There's too many names, man. It's hard to keep them straight. Chandler Jones gave him this huge deal, and all of them are gone. Chandler Jones, I mean, that's a different situation. Hopefully he's okay. But the Chargers traded JC Jackson back to the Pats. Which, like, wow. Broncos obviously cut Randy Gregory, so like that, it's kind of funny because as it was happening, you were like, damn, the AFC West arms race, and now it's like, all those moves that sucked.
You know, and to the George Payton thing, the one thing that also could force him to keep his job is, of course, what you possibly could see from guys like Jonathan Cooper and Nick Bonito in the future. Like that. So obviously those were draft picks, and you know, and those are maybe his baby, if you want to call it that. So,
well, I think, and this is something just to get into the Jets matchup, actually, that we're gonna start to see this next week, because with how historically terrible this defense has been, and I think I actually tweeted this out a few days ago, we're going to make Zach Wilson look like Broadway Joe. Like, you thought Zach Wilson looked good against the Chiefs, man? And just wait. He's going to look like the second
Let's
coming.
just hope that doesn't mean that Zach Wilson's going to make out with Susie Colbert in the middle of the game. That's all I'm saying.
I don't know, man. Zach likes the Cougars. That's all.
He does. You got a point.
But I think that, I mean, that's obviously a big key to the matchup, and Scott, I'm interested to hear your take, and I actually have a specific question for you. So I did notice as well that I think this news came out today that Breece Hall is no longer going to be on any kind of a snap count restriction.
Right.
And that scares the hell out of me, because you've seen far less talented backs than Breece Hall in these first 4 weeks completely like rip our defense to shreds. And Breece Hall, I think this was in the Bills game. Like his first carry back, he breaks it for like 50 yards.
80.
And then his second carry, he breaks it for like 80 yards. Then he has like 130 yards in 2 carries. What do you make of that? And then going into the reason I'm asking this question, like going into the following games, they kind of just like stopped. Maybe it was a snap count, but they kind of like stopped giving him the rock. What do you think about that? Was there like a different reason than that, or?
And is it going to be EC Breezy this weekend for the Jets in the running game?
Probably.
To quote the great Iron Eagle, Breece Lightning is what you may see. The Cowboys game, I think part of the reason you didn't get the ball a lot is because they fell behind pretty badly, and that's just the way the cookie crumbled. As far as what Robert Saleh said with a pitch count, it's interesting because if you look at what he said he's not going to be on a pitch count, but then sort of indicated that he's still going to limit the carries because he wants to make sure that Breece Hall doesn't get worn out. And I think the question at this point is, can the Jets give him more than the 6 carries he had against the Chiefs? You would hope so. So you're not going to give him 25 carries a game, but maybe closer to 15. And then as far as the other touches, do the Jets start looking towards Michael Carter instead of Dalvin Cook? Because Dalvin Cook has been brutal.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah.
I originally said when the Jets were sniffing around Dalvin Cook, I don't think he has much left. You'd watch this tape and he just didn't have that burst. And if you went and looked at the advanced analytics, this is a guy that just wasn't getting much after contact. He was, I think, bottom of the league in yards beyond expected. He was very much a product of that Minnesota offensive line the last 2 years. And when you brought that up, people would say, well, look at his stats. He had 1,200 yards and this and that. And it's like, yeah, he was a volume producer the last 2 years, but he wasn't the same level of back. And Arif Hassan, who covered continues to cover the Vikings, did it for The Athletic for a long time. Then he was doing it for PFN. Now he's on his own. He's got a Substack. And we talked about it. We did 2 parts breaking down the Dalvin Cook years in Minnesota. And what Arif and I were both saying is not getting that Dalvin Cook. You're getting a much different Dalvin Cook. And I think Jets fans' hopes were a little too high because they knew the name Dalvin Cook and they looked at his box score stats, but they didn't look a little deeper. And so when I suggested that the Jets didn't really need Cook, I don't think it was necessary to spend the money on him. And honestly, I don't think he's the same player. I'd rather they just go with who they already have. A lot of people got very angry. So I just said, okay, fine. Look, if they're going to bring him in to be LaDainian Tomlinson, maybe he gives them a couple of good games before he sort of loses steam, which is what Tomlinson did when the Jets had him in 2010. Most of his best games came in the first 6 weeks of the season. Then he sort of fell off a cliff. I said, look, if he can be that guy, give you 6 good weeks while Breece Hall sort of works himself back in, fine. But unfortunately, hasn't looked like that. He's looked like he's been running in quicksand. And now you're hearing all the excuses. Oh, well, he didn't have a training camp. Oh, well, he didn't have OTAs and all this. But neither did Breece Hall, and Breece Hall is obviously
back from the knee injury.
Yeah. So I think Breece Hall will have more carries, unless, hopefully this doesn't happen. But if the Broncos jump out to a huge lead, maybe not. But otherwise, I think he'll have more carries than he's had. I'm curious to see how many and what happens with Dalvin Cook, because at a certain point, and look, the buzz around here has been that Aaron Rodgers was a big part of the reason why Dalvin Cook was signed. A lot of it came down to Rodgers recruiting him and wanting him on the team. And so they ended up paying him $7-8 million. But realistically, at some point, the Jets have to look at this and say, he's not giving us much. We've got to go in a different direction. And so I'm curious if that happens in this game. If maybe Cook gets a carry or two and doesn't show anything, maybe they give some of the carries to Michael Carter, who's obviously younger and fresher.
Yeah. Javonte Williams running mate at UNC.
Right.
Yeah.
I was looking at the UNC score.
At what point, and I know that these guys are all competitors and they had high expectations going into the season with the idea that Aaron Rodgers was going to be under helm. At what point are you guys going to shift your focus towards developing young players, maybe at the detriment of being competitive this year? And when could you expect, at what threshold, I guess, would you expect that to happen? Because that's when you would start seeing guys like Carter get reps just to see, maybe we still have something in him, maybe we don't, and you move forward. Guys like Cobb obviously aren't getting burned. You're playing some of your other guys, but that's just kind of a big, I don't know. Are you guys really competing, or are you guys in between?
Well, I mean, I think they're going to try to compete. And the interesting thing here is that most of their best players are young guys. So you look at players like Quinnen Williams, who's 25 years old, Sauce Gardner, who's 22, DJ Reed, who's only 26, Elijah Vera-Tucker, I think, is 22 years old, right? Breece Hall is 22 or whatever it is. So Garrett Wilson, same thing. So a lot of their best players are young anyway. And I think that they are going to continue to try and win every week. And look, if Zach Wilson continues to play well and builds on what he did last week, I think that'll be important, because then you'll look at a situation where even if the Jets are maybe not mathematically eliminated, but realistically eliminated, they're going to try to continue to see what they have in Zach Wilson, sort of the same way that you've heard what Bears fans have said, which is they're trending towards Caleb Williams, but you sort of owe it to Fields to let him have the rest of the season and see if he can turn this around or anything like that. So I think as far as the younger players go, I mean, we're starting to see a little bit of that now, but it's been more out of necessity than just wanting to see young players play. So, for example, Xavier Gibson, who everybody probably saw have that punt return for the touchdown, the opening game on the Monday night against the Bills, they started using him a little bit in the offense just because he's fresh, he's young, and he's very quick. So they were trying to change it up with some spice in the offense, some end arounds and things like that. I think you may see something along those lines where I just said before Dalvin Cook, I don't necessarily think that if Dalvin Cook gets benched, it's because they're trying to see what the young guys got. It's going to be because Dalvin Cook's just not getting it done. And they're going to go to somebody who they think will be able to get it done. So if it gets out of hand, yeah, maybe you might see some of the younger players get a little bit of run. But for the most part, the good thing is a lot of their best players are young. And I think that was the whole idea of bringing in Aaron Rodgers, right? Was you have all these young, impactful players in their prime. A lot of them are on their rookie deals, not Quentin Williams, but the rest of these guys, not DJ Reed either, but he's still in a relatively affordable contract. So you bring in Aaron Rodgers and try to win now while you have those guys on their rookie deals. Unfortunately, we know what happened there, but now, maybe the silver lining is if Zach Wilson plays well, they're not going to have the kind of season that they would have had with Aaron Rodgers, most likely. But I think the question at this point is, can they find a way to compete week in and week out, get around the Rodgers situation, and can Zach Wilson show that he might be a quarterback in the NFL? And if he does, maybe he earns himself that fifth-year option, because I think going into the season, the idea was there's just no way the Jets can pick up that option because Wilson was so bad the first 2 years. How could you possibly commit to $20 million or whatever it is in a fifth year? But if he plays well this year, even if they go back to Rodgers in 2024, which I expect if Rodgers does come back, you can pick up that fifth-year option and it buys you a little bit of extra time. So I think to answer your question, Matty, I don't foresee a situation until maybe late in the season where they just say screw it and they start throwing in guys like Jason Brownlee, for example, a young wide receiver who, if you watch Hard Knocks, was an undrafted free agent who made the team. I think they're going to make adjustments to the lineup based on who's effective and who isn't. And I think a lot of the reason it's not necessarily necessary to do a lot of what you're saying is because a lot of their best players are young. But you could see a guy like Will McDonald, who finally was active this past week, the first-round pick out of Iowa State. Maybe down the stretch, if things aren't going well, he gets a little more run and they just call it a day with Carl Lawson, who's been getting less and less reps anyway at this point.
So I obviously have to ask you, it's an elephant in the room question, right? Everything that happened with Nathaniel Hackett and Sean Payton, it's a layer. It's a layered, question. So obviously, when the comments broke, and I think that, Sean kind of clarified it, that I think when he said those comments, it was a little bit before, he was hired by the Broncos. And so those comments were made, before he was hired, but I mean, when those happened, what was in your vantage point, how did you take it? And from everything we've seen, it seems like the Jets certainly were taking it a little bit personal. Do you think there's a side of it to where maybe Sean Payton was right or wrong? And then third, what has been the overall embrace of Nathaniel Hackett, down there in New York? Is it seem like he's actually been pretty good as offensive coordinator, or was it just he's just okay? But that Kansas City game was really that that game where you really kind of saw the opportunity to shine with Zach Wilson and really got a chance to see how that offense was humming?
Well, with the Sean Payton comments, first of all, I'll just say this. I think Sean Payton is obviously a very good coach. His track record speaks for itself. But I also think if we're keeping it real, as the kids say, if we're keeping it a buck, he's kind of a dirtbag, always has been. We all remember Bounty Gate and all of that. He's been known for saying these kind of things. And also, the truth of the matter is, I think it feels like a lot of what he says is out of self-preservation and trying to prop himself up. But look, you guys lived through last year. Nobody who watched the Broncos or has any clue about football doesn't understand that Nathaniel Hackett did a terrible job last year. I mean, the guy got fired before the end of his first season. You have to be a special kind of bad for that to happen. Mm-hmm. But I think what a lot of people got annoyed about was it just felt like those comments were unnecessary. Everybody knew how bad a job Hackett did, but I think for Payton to go out there and just blast him like that so openly felt a little, like I said, self-serving and dirty. And as far as Hackett goes, look, I didn't love the hire in the first place. I think I get why they did it, and there's a couple reasons. Number one, they wanted a guy who ran an offense similar to Mike LaFleur so that the players wouldn't have to learn a ton of new things in the offense. They wanted a guy who was experienced. They wanted somebody with a very different personality from Mike LaFleur, who is I guess you would say, a very buttoned up guy. Whereas, we all know Nathaniel Hackett, love him or hate him, is a very fun guy, a very fun personality. Everybody who's been around him will say that. Everybody saw Hard Knocks. And I said that. I joked. I said, look, I don't know if Nathaniel Hackett's going to be a good offensive coordinator, but he certainly seems like the most fun personality on this coaching staff since Rex Ryan, right? And what it comes down to with Hackett is, though, Cam, you were on the show and you talked about the Denver stop on the Hackett tour. My friend Drew Gear from the Rock Pile Report podcast, he came on to talk about the Buffalo years. I spoke to Gene Fournette, who covers the Jaguars, and he talked about the Jaguars years, and then we talked about the Green Bay years. And his most successful years were when he wasn't calling plays in Green Bay. That was Matt LaFleur's offense. Buffalo, not the best. You guys with Denver, not the best over there. Take a look at what he did with Jacksonville. I mean, people can point at Blake Bortles all they want to, but ultimately I would argue Blake Bortles was probably better under Greg Olsen. But either way, I was skeptical of Nathaniel Hackett as a coordinator. In the first few weeks, the offense looked bad. And I get it. He was scared of Zach Wilson. He was afraid to let the kid do anything because he'd had a track record of making big mistakes and all that. But I think this past week we got a glimpse into maybe what this offense could have looked like with Aaron Rodgers. And I don't mean that Zach Wilson was operating as well as Aaron Rodgers. I just mean that this was the offense that was the way they were running it was closer to the way they would have tried to run it if Rodgers was the quarterback, as opposed to what they were doing with Wilson, which was just, okay, go out there, hand the ball off, only throw the ball if you're 100% certain you can make the completion, don't throw an interception, and had him scared to death to make a mistake. So the book is still out on Hackett, obviously. I was skeptical of him because of what he'd done in his other stops. I still am. I think the Jets hired him for the reasons that I said. And also, I'm sure in the back of their minds, we all know, they were thinking about the Aaron Rodgers possibility. So we'll see with Hackett. But as of right now, I think the fan base sort of split. Like, a lot of them were not liking what they were seeing, but were much more receptive to what happened this week. I think the Broncos game will go a long way towards solidifying what Jets fans may think of Hackett going forward. But I do think this will be interesting because obviously he can say whatever he wants to during the week. And as we speak right now, Hackett will talk to the media tomorrow. No matter what he says, we know, considering that the Broncos got rid of him less than a season into his tenure, considering that Sean Payton said what he said, he's going to be extra motivated to do something against the Broncos. So that storyline will be a lot of fun. I don't know what this game is going to look like, but I do know that there will be plenty of talk about that on the pregame shows and such over the next couple of days.
Yeah, and I think going into just kind of what we think is going to happen in the game, I think this is going to be, and Cam, you kind of alluded to it a little bit, the big test for is Russ really, not going to say back because he's not officially back. I would say we've probably maybe gotten, I don't know, 80% of what we traded for, which considering last year, I'm happy with. But I think this is going to be the test because, again, I mean, you talked about it, Scott. Week 1, Josh Allen struggled, right? Last week, Zach Wilson straight up looked better than Patrick Mahomes. And actually, I'm curious now that we've got you. What was your thoughts on? I know there's like kind of that running joke out there too that Sauce Gardner holds every play anyway, but that holding penalty that was thrown basically because Pat threw the interception and they just had to like find a way to not have that happen.
Well, first of all, the idea that Sauce holds on every play is the most absurd nonsense I've ever heard in my life.
I really haven't watched some snaps, so I don't know, but I just see it all the time and I'm like, that's funny.
Yeah, I think it's just one of those things that people got mad because there was a lot of hype early on. I was laughing because they were like, they're building this kid up because they want the Jets to have a star. I'm like, listen, buddy, I've been a fan of the Jets for like 40 years, and I can assure you that nobody in the media or the NFL league office does the Jets any favors. So let's disabuse. I think what it comes down to with Sauce generally is that he's a physical corner. So he'll use his hands and there's hand fighting. But if you watch these games, you guys know this. That's how these battles are. Look, if DeAndre Hopkins was called for offensive pass interference every time he got physical with a corner, he'd be called 25 times a game. So that's just the way it is. The whole always holding. Look, if you want to get technical about the rules, it's like anything else. There's a strike zone in baseball, right? But the umpire determines sort of like, okay, I'm going to call strikes a little bit low. I'm going to call strikes a little bit high. I'm going to call strikes a little bit inside. And I think that was a big part of the problem as far as what happened on Sunday night, because that entire game, that was the way the receivers and the corners were playing each other. Garrett Wilson was getting hand checked the whole night, and I'm not complaining about that. That's fine. That's just the physical nature of the game. But then with, 2-3 minutes left in the game, you're calling that on a 3rd and 20 that would have put the Chiefs in a position where they would have had to try a field goal and a long one at that, or punt it back, and you're calling that on Sauce. It's like if you were not calling inside strikes an entire game, and then in the 9th inning, all of a sudden you start calling inside strikes. Well, where's consistency? It's got to be one or the other here. You've got to be consistent about the way you call these things. And yeah, look, the flag came out and was thrown after the interception, which adds fuel to the fire. Mm-hmm. Taylor Swift, Patrick Mahomes, we all know the story there. So, yeah, I thought it was BS. And then there were a lot of calls that I thought went against the Jets. And look, Cam, you know this
has been anything but consistent this year.
No, it's been terrible. And Cam, you know this about me, man, because we've talked a lot. I'm not one who likes to blame officials. Like, yeah, there's bad calls here and there, but I'm not one who will say, oh, the refs this, the refs that. The refs cost the Jets that game. It's that simple. I mean, the Pacheco touchdown run when Donovan Smith first held the guy and then tripped the guy, the Sauce play, the play where Donovan Smith was basically committing felony assault against Jermaine Johnson. I mean, we could go down the list. There's a bunch of these where it was just, yeah, it was absurd. But the intentional grounding non-call, that was another one. Yeah. That was ridiculous. It was funny. I was sitting with a friend of mine who's a 49er.
Yeah, was like the whole time, like, I can't do it with my mic in front of me.
Yeah.
That was cool.
Yeah. Well, I was sitting with a friend of mine who's a 49ers fan, and I said to him, in what world is that not intentional grounding? And he goes, when it's Patrick Mahomes. And we both laughed because that's what it was. But yeah, no, man, it drove me nuts. And the Sauce thing is stupid. Like, this became a thing that I think a lot of people were mad. And look, I get it. Like, Surtain obviously is a great corner. And so there's the arguments, who's better. Who cares? They're two of the best corners in the league. I don't really think it matters who's better. They're both great. But I think that's what it became, is people saw it as overhype and this and that. But no, Sauce is great, and it's getting to the point now. And you guys are probably seeing this with Surtain because of how good he is. If he lets up like a 5 or 6 yard screen pass, everybody's like, oh, Sauce got cooked. Yeah, exactly. And it's
I mean,
we saw that the other week. It was when the Jets played against I want to say it was the game against the Cowboys, and he gave up like 40 yards receiving or something, and they're like, oh, Sauce got cooked. You're like, all right, sure.
I mean, you mentioned about the Chiefs and, not trying to blame the refs. I mean, as a Bronco fan, we know that all too well. I mean, if you go look into the game that happened in Arrowhead last year, there was a phantom pass interference penalty, with Cortland Sutton, and so we know all too well. Now,
also say, by the way, obviously, I know all about that too, having lived through the Tom Brady years in New England as well.
That actually is going to allude to exactly what I was going to say. So obviously, we're doing a Broncos Jets preview. But that said, do you think that there is something going on right now? Because you mentioned it, there was something happening during some of those Patriot years where it felt like they were rigging it a little bit, to use that word, rigging it a little bit for the New England Patriots. It certainly seems like we're entering an era with Pat Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs where you're starting to see that exact same conversation. You referenced it. I mean, I think and I don't know if the referee actually spoke out about it, but I mean, if the referee just flat out comes out and says, hey, you know what? I was just very late when I was actually throwing the flag, and, and that's in essence why, it certainly came in and it actually looked like I was, making the call as soon as the interception happened. If he came out and actually said like his reasonings why, he actually threw the flag, I think we would feel a little bit better. It doesn't take away from, the NFL possibly rigging things, but I actually am with you. I think that there is something to be had right now about an NFL problem with the Kansas City Chiefs.
I don't know that rigging is the right word, but man, they are just the inconsistency, and they're giving. Let's put it this way: it's sort of like, all right, first let's stipulate this: the Chiefs are a great team, and Patrick Mahomes is the best player in the league, and I don't think it's close. So let's start there and say that. But also, I think it's sort of the Michael Jordan, Tom Brady. The best player gets an absurd amount of latitude. And I think that's what you're seeing with Mahomes and the Chiefs. And then obviously it just adds fuel to the fire to see stuff like the NFL tweeting out, hey, the Chiefs are 2-0 as Swifties, right? With Taylor Swift in the building and all that. I got to tell you guys, I'll say this right now. And I don't care. I hope your listeners are with me on this. If they're not, I'm sorry, but this is the truth. I've never understood the Taylor Swift phenomenon. I never will. I get why people like her. I don't get why they like her that much. Her music is incredibly mediocre. And look, Beyonce is just drop dead gorgeous, right? So people can say, oh, I don't get Beyonce. Beyonce's a performer. She dances. She's gorgeous, all that. So you're like, okay, like her music, don't like her music. You get the package, right? Taylor Swift is just like a regular girl who has like very basic music, and I don't understand the phenomenon. And now it's somehow taken hold in the football world. I used to be able to ignore it and not care, but then for like a week before the game, all anybody was talking about was Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift and Monday and Sunday Night Football, and she's going to be at the game, and ticket prices actually went up for a while because she was going to be at the game. She wasn't performing. Yeah. She wasn't performing, but she was just going to be in the building. And so ticket prices went up. That whole thing drove me nuts. So you have the Mahomes stuff with the Chiefs, right? Then you have the Taylor Swift stuff going on. And it's just going to make it even worse where people are going to say the NFL is bending over backwards to do the Chiefs favors. I'm not saying it's like a league-wide conspiracy, but they just keep, for those that think it is a league-wide conspiracy, they just keep throwing more and more fuel onto that fire.
So I was gonna say, so if the Swifties come after us and they cancel the MHRT network and the Manly Broncos podcast, we officially know that we are going to be blaming Scott for the reason why the Manly Broncos is no longer on the network. You had a question,
That's right.
Matty. You had a question, Matty?
I'm just saying that, like, Travis Kelce has been known in NFL circles for a long time. He's done some advertisements, right? The guy's literally all over TV now. Mahomes and Otto, Mr. Pfizer, whatever. Like the dude is all over the place. And it happened right before all this news broke that he was with Taylor Swift. It feels like it was a PR thing from both sides that was highly scripted, and all this stuff's getting released. And it's to drum up. I think the NFL, either they're a part of it or they're super duper leaning into it, very opportunistic. And
absolutely,
like there's zero chance that the Chiefs are officiated properly with all of the incentive for them to be good. And for this to continue. Let's continue this. Let's continue this this dream thing, right? Patrick Mahomes was on quarterback last year. And that was to soften the public's perspective of his wife. And that worked to a degree for a lot of people. That rewrote a narrative. They're controlling a narrative. They're keeping the Chiefs in the spotlight. They want the Chiefs to go far because they could document it. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a behind-the-scenes Travis and Taylor type of like reality documentary, and it's going to amp up into the playoffs and all that stuff. Like, it's there. It's all there, and it feels very artificial. I'm not saying it's not genuine, but I'm saying it feels that way with the way that everything's being presented.
And listen, like you said, the NFL now has a major incentive to keep this going. And Charles Robinson from Yahoo, who I think is one of the best football reporters in the country, talked about this. I mean, Woody Johnson put up a photo on his Twitter of him with his grandson and Taylor Swift and said, "Hey, we're Swifties too," which, dude, read the room. Jets fans don't want to see that. But everybody's bending over backwards. And look, ultimately, you've got people. Matthew Berry joked about this. Matthew Berry said his teenage daughter said to him, "Dad, I'm really getting into football now." And he said, "I've been making a living, putting food on the table, paying for the roof over your head for years, covering this sport or, fantasy football. And because Taylor Swift likes a guy that plays on the Chiefs now, you're seeing this, right? You're seeing, was like 500,000 more people subscribe to the Kelsey Brothers podcast. You're seeing more people. All these Swifties are tuning into football that never watched football. So the NFL's got this incentive to keep this going. And it's really amazing because she almost feels like a cult leader. Like, Taylor Swift is dating a
100%.
No, it's a cult.
100%.
I was going to say, this goes perfectly into, I was actually going to mention this already before we brought it up. What Matty was saying about it being a bit rigged with that whole situation of her and Kelsey. Like, I will say this, props to the NFL and their marketing team for this, because that's exactly how you get the millions of people that have no interest in your product to suddenly be incredibly invested in your product. Like, I hate it, but damn, that's that's your genius. Well, 9,000.
And I think Matty was right when he said it. The NFL either has some sort of role in this, or they're taking full advantage of what's going on here. So it really is amazing how much they are really playing this up. And I just, I hope at some point this whole thing dissolves with him and Taylor Swift and she goes and writes some album about, I used to have a tight end, which double entendre there. But I'm just saying, like, if I need this to end, because my
God,
the Swifties were like weird to me to begin with, but now they've invaded our territory. Yeah. Now they've invaded our territory, and we don't want that. Football fans are like, make it stop, please, just make it stop.
Oh, that's funny.
Well, I gotta say, not from a Swifty and Travis Kelce like to break them up. Honestly, with the way the Kansas City Chiefs have been playing, specifically Pat Mahomes, honestly, I want this thing to last as much as it can, because you know what? The more Taylor Swift is actually associated with Travis Kelce, the more you probably actually see the downfall of the Kansas City Chiefs. So honestly, I would love to see this continue, where you actually see the downfall of the Kansas City Chiefs. And then at that point,
be careful. You're on thin ice right now.
And then at that point, when they do break up, that's when you get the you get the breakup song, the very emotional breakup song.
But by the way, can I say this? Taylor Swift is what, 32 years old?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. How many damn boyfriends has this woman had? She's written breakup songs about like 8,000 guys. What is going on there?
She's a grown woman. She's a grown woman, and these Swifties are like defending her like she's a teenage girl. Like,
it's unreal.
I'm like, come on, man. Like, enough's enough.
I don't get it. Anything about it. I mean, I had a friend. I shouldn't even say this, but I will. I had a friend who texted me and goes, because I don't know if you saw, but like Blake Lively, I guess, was there with her.
Yes.
So I had a friend who texted me and said,
which I hate. Don't drag my boy into this.
Dreamboat.
No, I had a friend who texted me and said, if I'm Taylor Swift's publicist, I'm never letting her be in the same shot as Blake Lively again. Yeah. Because you can figure out why.
that was something. I mean, like that's when you know that the Taylor Swift craze has reached an all-time high, is when you actually have Ryan Reynolds and Blake Lively actually there, and all the attention and all the stuff that you're seeing is going straightly over to Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce, when you clearly, like, you have other famous performers there, and so I'm definitely, it's really unfortunate the way things have been dragged. But I mean, I don't want to tell people how to live their personal life at that same time. So I mean, if Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift somehow make it work, power to them. But right now it's just unfortunate right now. It just feels like it's creating a big, massive media frenzy.
And can I also say this? Travis Kelce was sort of like, oh, they're overdoing it, and sort of talking about his privacy and all that. Dude, you asked out the most famous woman in the world who has a fan base of crazy people who are obsessed with her. How did you seriously are going to sit there and complain about a lack of privacy or whatever? If you wanted privacy, don't ask out Taylor Swift, pal.
Who broke the news in NFL circles that him and Taylor Swift were talking?
He did, right? Didn't he do that? Wasn't he the one?
Adam Schefter. Schefter tweeted it.
Yeah.
And the next thing you knew, the next day she was at the game. Like,
I'm telling you, it's a genius marketing ploy by the NFL.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think the NFL, Taylor Swift's people, Travis Kelce's people, it benefits everybody, but you also can't then sit there and talk about your lack of privacy. It's like, dude, you're dating the most famous woman in the world who has a cult-like following. If you wanted privacy, you should have stuck with the Instagram models you were dating.
Yeah. So to tie a bow on obviously everything with the Broncos and the Jets, we'll do our NFL picks here in just a little bit. But what is more likely, Scott, that the Broncos will actually the Broncos fans will actually troll Nathaniel Hackett and count down the clock, the play clock, which is what is more likely, that to happen or the Jets to come out with a victory?
That's interesting. I gotta be honest, man.
That's the best pickup, because I think 100% they're gonna count down the clock.
And look, he earned that. He certainly earned that. He's certainly earned that, and I don't feel bad for him at all. I'll say this: I think it could go either way. I know that sounds like a cop out, but honestly, I just don't know what to make of either one of these teams. The Broncos have looked much better on offense, but they haven't really done anything meaningful against the quality defense. Now they face the Jets. Zach Wilson looked really good last week against the Kansas City Chiefs, but is that something he can sustain, or does the clock strike midnight and the carriage turns back into a pumpkin, right? So I don't know. I mean, it's a tough thing to figure out here. I think it could go either way, and I think the fact that the point spread is Denver minus 2.5 sort of indicates that if this was on a neutral field, it would be about an even spread. So I think it's about a 50-50 proposition probably.
And if you guys, by the way, anybody that is in the chat, if you guys actually have any questions that are New York Jets related questions, preferably not Taylor Swift questions, by the way, but like if you have any Jets related questions, or maybe talking about like the preview, feel free to chime in before we send things off here, and of course we're doing NFL pick'em. So yeah, Matty. Okay,
two things. Matchup predictor has 54.6 in favor of the Jets. So there's that. I have a question about an emerging player on the Broncos and what he could potentially do this week. The Jets defense obviously vaunted. I'm talking about one Jaleel in the arms of the angel McLaughlin. So
I suddenly have a need to adopt a pet.
Listen, for $1 a day, you could sponsor one. So the guy is uber efficient.
You got to make that
72 yards on 7 carries, effective in the passing game, lightning fast, is the all-time NCAA leader for rushing yards in a career, if I heard that correctly. Is there potential for him with his home run ability to affect the game with your defense, or are your run fits so sound under Saleh that there's really not a lot of daylight to take advantage of that?
No, I think he could. And the Jet run defense has not been great this year. It's been probably their weakest link. Pacheco really gashed them, and so did Mahomes, for that matter, with his legs. For as ineffective as he was throwing the ball, he made some big plays with his legs. Now, as we established, the referees certainly helped. They helped on that long Pacheco touchdown run. They helped on the Patrick Mahomes 23-yard run on the third down. But still, that run defense, they tend to overcommit and be over-aggressive, and sometimes it costs them. They got gashed by Pacheco, and I certainly think McLaughlin has a chance to do something against them. I actually, by the way, would have gone with Jaleel. Did I do that, McLaughlin? Because Jaleel White, Urkel.
Right.
I was going to say, I think if there's one chink in the armor of the Jets defense, it's kind of the rushing.
Yeah.
And I know that who knows if Javonte will play. That's kind of been up in the air a little bit. I personally, if I had to predict right now, I don't know. I don't think he's going to be out there with that kind of hip strain, I guess, that he had. But Jaleel, I mean, we've been kind of talking about him since camp, especially when Cameron and I went, and he kind of just has been he was the camp darling this year. And he had his game. He showed out. So I'm excited, although I know I talked about as well how bad our rush defense is, and Brees Lightning is incredibly talented. So this might be like a gash him on the ground kind of game. And then it's who can pass better. Zach Wilson against Swiss cheese, or Russ against potentially old Russ against a good Jets defense. I mean, I'm actually kind of excited to see that.
Well, I'm really curious to see, Sean Payton has been really creative, and Joe Lombardi have been really creative in how they, divvy up their targets. And of course, with a really good Jets secondary, I'm really curious to see how they do that. And Brad Smith actually chimes in. Like, I almost wonder, because like, it feels like, and I'm glad he mentioned Jerry Jeudy in this, because like I'm not going to mention the trade rumors. Like, I'm not going to mention that, even though I just did. Anyway, but I think that, like, when you look at Jerry Jeudy, I also feel like, it may seem like he's not averaging, 10 to 15 targets or 20 targets, however many feels like you think it's adequate for Jeudy. By that same token, the targets that he is getting, and, the 50-some yards, he's getting yards after the catch. And I think that it just feels like we're at that moment where Jeudy is about to break one. And and especially with where he's at. So I think that too, for Jerry, I'm really curious to see what's going to happen with him. And do you see more of so they were more balanced, right? Like the Broncos offense was way more balanced. Obviously it was light, if you will, on some of the targets and the receptions for some of these players. even for Marvin Mims's, case, and I know that he leads the team in receiving yards, but he still, for the lion's share of targets, is also, seeing a rather less amount. So I'm really curious from the Broncos offensive point of view, do we continue that? And obviously if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But guys like Jerry Jeudy, Marvin Mims especially deserve those targets and a fair share of those targets.
Well, Cam, let me just say, you guys might get a bit of a break in this game because I'm not sure if you're aware of this. DJ Reed, who I believe was a Pro Bowl alternate last year for the Jets, he was in concussion protocol this week. Robert Saleh said he's optimistic that Reed will play, but he also said that he was optimistic Dwayne Brown was going to play, and 6 hours later they put him on IR. So this feels like gamesmanship because, as Rich Cimini over at ESPN reported, no player that's been in concussion protocol yet this season has played that week. The last guy to do that was Kenny Pickett last season. I have a hunch that DJ Reed is not going to play in this game, and his backup, Brandon Eccles, is out. He's been ruled out. So you've got Sauce to deal with, but that other corner spot could be a liability. You could be seeing Bryce Hall, former University of Virginia product, who was a starter for the Jets in his second year, but really fell out of favor quickly. He's on the practice squad, or actually he's not on the practice squad. He's on the active roster, but he's been inactive in all these games. The Jets went and signed a bunch of defensive backs this week. So it leads me to believe that not only is Eccles out, but Reed probably will not play in this game. So if Judy's going to break out, this would probably be one of the times that would make a lot of sense for him to be able to do it.
I haven't paid attention enough to alignment. Is Sauce going to shadow, or is he going to stay on the boundary? Would he go into the slot for a certain matchup? Where can we expect him to be on the field?
They move him around. He's not going to shadow. This is actually something that was talked about a while ago. People were asking after CeeDee Lamb carved up the Jets, why wasn't Sauce shadowing CeeDee Lamb? And Jeff Ulbrich, the defensive coordinator, gave an answer that I didn't particularly like. He said, well, that's not what we do in this defense, and this defense has been very successful, so that's how we're going to do this. And I didn't like that answer, not because, of course, people are like, oh, well, what, you think you know more than Jeff Ulbrich, who's been a lifetime football coach? And then, of course, my answer is Google appeal to authority. And by the way, Adam Gase coached football his whole life too. I guess he was infallible, and Nathaniel Hackett couldn't be questioned last year because he's a lifetime football coach. So it's just a stupid argument, but I liked what Robert Saleh said going into this past week's game when asked about the possibility of Sauce Gardner maybe covering Travis Kelce, and he said everything will be on the table, which is, I think, what any smart coach will always say. Even if your plan is not to do that, your plan should be, hey, maybe I'm not going to shadow, but if things aren't working and I need to do it, I will. So I don't think that he's going to shadow anybody. I think he'll be on one side. It'll be the whole Richard Sherman deal, and he'll play a little bit of everything. But I would say that you're probably going to look at Sauce on one side of the field, and then unless DJ Reed plays, probably Bryce Hall or somebody like that. And that's a matchup that if it happens, if DJ Reed does not play, the Broncos should be able to take advantage of.
So same frustrations that we have with Pat Surtain.
Yes.
The
difference is you don't have as much of the Jets don't have as much of a frustration because they have DJ Reed as well. But this week, if they don't have him, then yes, they would have the exact same frustration as the Broncos.
So we'll save the Jets Bronco prediction for the last part of our NFL picks. Let's get into NFL picks. It's something we're adding now just this year, Scott. So you're new to this as much as we're new to this. So what we've been using is we've been using the ESPN app to kind of gauge the games and everything. So we start from there and we go down. So we'll like I said, we'll save the Jets and Broncos pick for the last one because that's what you do when you're in media. You save what you're actually talking about for the very last thing, right? We call a tease in the radio business, Cam. A tease, exactly. We'll start with the Commanders and the Chicago Bears, obviously. So Chicago Bears having the devastating loss obviously to the Denver Broncos. They play tomorrow on Thursday against the Washington Commandos on Thursday. Do we go in Commanders, or do we actually think that the Bears will be desperate enough to get that dub?
Are we doing straight up pick 'em, or are we going against the
Straight.
spread?
It's a straight pick 'em.
Yeah, just straight pick 'em.
All right, who wants to go? You want to go first, Scott?
It's at
Yeah.
Washington, if that makes a difference.
Sure. Yeah, I'm going with Washington on this one. I just think they're a better team. I think the Bears, especially after the Broncos came back and beat them, are going to be reeling. And I think there's a very good chance that not only do the Commanders win this game, but they end the head coaching career, at least for now, of Matt Eberflus. I think Washington wins this, Eberflus gets fired, and then we'll see what happens from there. But yeah, I've liked what I've seen from Sam Howell, and he's proof again that if there's a quarterback late in the draft that you like that fell for whatever reason, or you just happen to think he's better than what other teams think, take him and just see what you can do with him. Because Sam Howell may or may not be great, but so far he's played fairly well, and if nothing else, he's more than justified a 5th-round pick at this point.
Funny enough, he also landed in the NFC East as well, and I say that because of Jalen Hurts.
Right.
What about you guys, Brandon, Matty?
I'm going with Washington for a very similar
Is this a sweep?
Washington's going to cover. I'm also starting my DraftKings lineups with Robinson Jr. And also throwing the Commanders defense into the flex. So little showdown slate action for y'all.
Okay. Bills and Jaguars. Second straight week that the Jaguars will be in London and they'll face the Buffalo Bills, which, by the way, we should actually say the Toy Story broadcast. I don't know if you guys had a chance to actually see this. That was actually really cool. I mean,
I don't know how the hell they did that.
Yeah.
I don't get it. But that Bijan run, or no, I'm thinking of a different one. Never mind. Was that the because that was the Falcons game, right, Jags?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Wasn't it the Bijan run that they kind of had like that highlight of on the Toy Story stream, I guess, where he like took the outside carry and like juked a guy?
Mm-hmm.
But it was on the Toy Story stream. That was like wild to see in pixels.
But Bills Jaguars.
So the Jaguars have an advantage here because they've been in London. The Bills are going to have to fly over there, and obviously there's the time change and the long flight and all of that. I'm torn on this because right now the Bills are riding high. They've won 3 in a row. They just destroyed the Miami Dolphins, which was fun to watch because I was really getting tired of all the hype around the Dolphins. And so this could be a letdown game against a Jaguars team that, as I said, has almost a home field advantage at a certain point. But I feel like the Bills are just rolling right now and are going to win this one. Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs are just locked in. And right now we're seeing the very best of Sean McDermott. He did a phenomenal job with his game plan last week against Tua and the Dolphins. I would expect a lot of that against the Jaguars and Trevor Lawrence. So even though I could see a world where the Jaguars upset the Bills for the reasons I said, I'm going with Bills.
It almost feels like the Jets' loss that they had pissed them off a little bit, which, I mean, I would be too. Sadly, like when Rodgers goes down, you don't take advantage of it. I mean, I would be pissed off too. So, what about you guys?
Yeah,
Matty?
I don't know how Jacksonville. Sorry, I just interrupted you. I don't know how Jacksonville could possibly stop the Buffalo offense. So, I mean, that's going to be specifically Diggs.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he just absolutely exploded last week, and I don't know what they're going to do. So I'm taking Buffalo. Go ahead, Matty.
Buffalo is going to win, but they're not going to cover 5.5. Real quick for that, ETN should be all right, but one of the bigger weapons for Jacksonville is Ingram, and Buffalo is the best team in football in covering tight ends this year. So that's a limitation. Keeping with tight ends, Dawson Knox is going to be potentially out of this game. However, Kincaid should take a step forward, a little diamond in the rough play for you this weekend if you guys need it. But I think Buffalo pulls out the win.
So the next game is the Colts and Titans. So Titans obviously came away with a huge win over the Cincinnati Bengals. Felt more like a how injured is Joe Burrow type of game than probably how good are the Tennessee Titans. I don't want to overreact too much on that. But they also play an Indianapolis Colts team that came back on the Los Angeles Rams, and Anthony Richardson looks like a dude. I mean, like he made some huge big time throws in that game against the Rams. I'm actually going with the Colts here and everything that we've seen so far with that Colts team.
Yeah, I think I agree with you, Cam. And Anthony Richardson's interesting because I think the thought process was, and maybe this ends up being the case at the end of the day, that Richardson was going to have to sit for a year. He was going to have to learn. He wasn't going to be ready to play day one. But I have a friend who covers the Colts, and I was checking in. I was just curious, and he would keep telling me, yeah, Richardson's going to play. Gardner Minshew's just not out playing him in training camp. They're going to have to play Richardson, which is what happened. And look, I had said that if I was picking first, I probably would have gone with Anthony Richardson in this draft. And the reason is because I just think the upside, if you have a coach like Shane Steichen, who we've seen what he's done with a player with similar skills like Jalen Hurts, if you were confident that he could do something like that with Richardson, who's bigger, stronger, and faster than Hurts, believe it or not, then you take him at number one because his upside is absolutely through the roof. And for me, look, Bryce Young may still be good. It's only been a few games. He could end up being very good. But I would always be nervous about picking a quarterback who's built like a slot receiver. So that was kind of my thinking. And I think, like you said, Richardson looks like he might be way ahead of schedule. He's played pretty well this year, other than obviously the one game they didn't play and Minshew was in that game. So I like the Colts here. The Titans are weird. They've been up and down, but they're sort of an old team, and I don't trust them. They seem like a team that's sort of going through the motions. They beat the Bengals, but as you said, it almost felt like a Joe Burrow can't really play right now because he's too hurt game. So I kind of like the Colts here.
Go ahead, Manny.
Okay, so Titans, two things about the Titans. One, they're really good against the run, and they're really bad against the pass. But the good against the run is good against running backs and keeping run fits. They actually struggle a little bit when it comes to mobile quarterbacks, and that's a systemic thing for them over the last several seasons. So if you're playing your Moss, if you're going to take a risk on Taylor, that's not the way to go. But Richardson can get them with his legs. Also think downs the field could make them pay in one-on-one matchups, especially with as much respect as Pittman gets underneath. So I say all that to say, if Richardson doesn't make a bonehead play early and gift them a touchdown, they're going to be playing from ahead. And that's a negative game script for the Titans, and I just don't trust Tannehill. Tennessee is getting 2 points on the road. I think that's a mistake. I think the Colts win by 6 or more in this game.
I definitely think the Colts are also going to win this game. One thing that I'm surprised I haven't any of you mentioned yet, although it's yet to see what happens, but they did activate Jonathan Taylor off of the PUP in his 21-day practice window, and he was technically at practice, even though it was a walkthrough. Full practice, but it was a walkthrough. So it wasn't really practice. But they listed him as a full participant. I don't know. He technically is eligible to play in this game. I don't know if they will play him in this game. I still don't know what's happening with this contract situation, but it's also been reported that the relationship between him and the Colts has kind of been getting better. So it's interesting to kind of follow that storyline. Like you mentioned, though, Matty, like Tennessee is very, very good against the run. And even if he comes back that week, I don't know that it makes a massive difference, but he's so talented that if he does, like, you have to kind of do whatever you can to stop Jonathan Taylor, even though, he's been out of football for a while. Not even really that long, until really 4 weeks in. I still think the Colts are going to win. I just think Anthony Richardson, he's great running the ball, but like watching him go through his reads and make absolutely ridiculous passes. Like last week, there was this pass against the Rams where he was like stepping up kind of into the pocket, and he literally stepped into Aaron Donald, and like he couldn't move his whole body to like go through the full throwing motion. He just kind of like flicked it with the right side of his body, and it was just like on a rope. It was a ridiculous pass.
Threw like 45 yards.
He's so good.
Yeah.
I'm taking the Colts. Tennessee's pass defense is horrible.
Maybe
running the football against Tennessee is a waste of a play. It's like if a team stacks the paint with 5 players in basketball and you decide to drive it to the lane anyway, just take the open jumper. That's what throwing against their secondary is.
Maybe, and this is based on the play, certainly of where the Saints are right now. But maybe one of the more boring games, in terms of the weekend. But that said, I felt like Dallas beating the Patriots is actually going to give them a little bit extra incentive. And so I think that I have the Patriots over the Saints. And oh, by the way, there's a reunion now. J.C. Jackson is heading back to New England, leaving the Los Angeles Chargers and going back to Belichick. So I have the Patriots over the Saints because the Saints laid an egg against the resurgence of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, or should I say Baker Mayfield. So I have the Patriots over this one.
I'm going to go with this
fast. Go ahead.
Yeah, for sure. I'm going to go with the Saints, though. It's funny because everybody loves to bag on Derek Carr for some reason, who I think is a really good quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
The issue this past game against the Buccaneers for him is that he's got a sprained AC joint.
Mm-hmm.
Quarterbacks are not supposed to play with that. Like, it's very tough to do much. He should probably be out 2 to 4 weeks, and he played anyway. And the truth is, they probably would have been better off just letting Winston play. But you know how that goes. Carr's in a position where if he doesn't play, he's soft. If he does play and he doesn't play up to standards because he's hurt, then he's not good. And then, of course, if he sits out and Jameis Winston has a good game, then everybody's yelling for Jameis Winston. So I think the Saints have enough to beat the Patriots, though. The Patriots have a solid defense, but their offense is really bad, and Mac Jones has been terrible. He actually got benched in that Cowboys game. So like you said, Brennan, I think this is going to be a very boring game, a snooze fest, but I think the Saints will win it.
I agree. Everything you just said, I agree. I do think the Saints win, but I think it's going to just be super boring.
What about you, Matty?
If you need a field goal kicker, this is a game to look at. It's going to be a defensive battle. Like, I could see this being something like 12-9, even maybe
11-10.
Something like that. I think the Patriots are going to find a way to win. I just don't know how they fall to 1-4. And the Saints, like, Olave had some targets. He had one catch for 4 yards. Like, if the quarterback can't throw the football to anybody but Alvin Kamara a few yards away, that offense is going to have trouble moving the football. And I think Belichick will do just enough.
Alvin Kamara somehow set a record for least yards with 13 receptions in NFL history with 34 yards. The previous lowest was 70 on 13 catches.
My son is 2 years old.
That's insane.
When I'm playing catch with my son, he can only be like a couple of feet away from me, and that's very reminiscent of the passing game that the Saints had last week. And just like, all right, stick your arms out, Alvin. Here you go. Like, that's pretty much what it was.
This seems to be a really obvious one, but the Baltimore Ravens and Matty's number 1 overall pick in terms of the seed for the AFC is certainly looking really good with the Ravens right now. But Ravens and Steelers, it's divisional, and it's in Pittsburgh, but I'm going Ravens here. What about you guys?
Yeah, man, you have to. The Steelers have the worst offense in the league right now.
Matt Canada is still the OC. Next question.
Yeah, exactly. I will say this though. So if you go and look at my Twitter bio, you'll see that it says president of the Todd Monken fan club. I wanted the Jets to hire him 2 separate times. I wanted them to hire him over Gase. We know how that worked out. And then, of course, he went to Georgia. He had the stop in Cleveland. That was a mess. Not his fault. He went to Georgia. They won the two national championships, and now he's back in the NFL with the Ravens. And what I had said was, I feel like that combination of Monken, who's a terrific offensive coordinator, and Lamar Jackson, we were going to see the absolute best of Lamar Jackson, and we are starting to see that. Lamar Jackson is a legitimate MVP candidate at this point, and the Ravens are cooking. And I think they're going to win this one and win this one pretty handily. I'm really looking forward to seeing what this Ravens team can do the rest of the way, because we heard a lot about the Jets in the offseason, obviously, because of Rodgers, the Dolphins in the 70-point offense, the Bills, the Chiefs, the Bengals. But it felt like the Ravens sort of got lost in the shuffle a little bit, and they've been showing out, and I think they're going to do it again on Sunday.
You guys got Ravens as well?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Pittsburgh is a dumpster fire.
Matty, you got Ravens?
Their defense is still pretty good, but just their offense is so bad.
Terrible.
Easily Ravens. Yeah, Ravens by 6.
Well, and definitely with it being a divisional game, it'll be interesting to see if Matt Canada goes to his burner account and tweets something in terms of the Baltimore Ravens.
What, for not turning Pickett into Mahomes? That's
right. We'll do 2 on this one: the Houston Texans and the Atlanta Falcons, and the Panthers and the Lions. I think the Panthers and Lions, we have a certain idea where that's going to go. What about the Texans and Falcons? The Texans, C.J. Stroud is playing really well. Nico Collins is emerging. Tank Dell
looks good.
Looks
Tank
good.
Dell does look good.
So
Damian Pierce too.
Yeah, it seems like C.J. Stroud, between probably he, Bijan Robinson, and Anthony Richardson, are neck and neck in terms of offensive rookie of the year. So the Texans, I have the Texans on this one.
Yeah, I think you have to. The Falcons are just a weird team. I mean, look at all the resources they put into these offensive weapons, and then they're barely using them. Is Kyle Pitts still in the league? What's going on with Drake London? Is he alive? What's happening there? I couldn't possibly tell. But I really like what the Texans have done. It's funny because I tweeted out the Texans back in 2017 traded up to get a franchise quarterback. A few years later, they ended up being forced to trade him. And a year after they were forced to trade him, they hit on another franchise quarterback. As a Jets fan, can't relate to any of that. So I think it's just remarkable. Yeah, I'm telling you, man, it's crazy. But I love
so good.
I love what CJ Stroud's done, and I didn't see it coming. Like, I thought he might be solid, but I didn't think he'd be this good this quickly. And obviously, look, sometimes these quarterbacks get off to a hot start and then they sort of come back down to earth. But I really like what Houston's done there. Like you said, Nico Collins, boy, has he played tremendous football. Damian Pierce is really good. Tank Dell, they've really put together something there. Nick Caserio, who was put into a position that looked like was almost impossible for him with Watson and all the other mess, and Cal McNair being what described to me as the Tommy Callahan of the NFL. Obviously, that's Tommy Boy from the movie, that Chris Farley's character. That he was just basically a guy who was the son of a rich dude, but kind of an idiot. But all of a sudden, here come the Texans. And look, right now that division is interesting. Every team in that division is 2-2. And if you would have asked people at the beginning of the year, you would have heard most people say Jaguars should win that division. The Titans, you can never count them out, but the Colts and the Texans should both be among the worst teams. Guess what? Anthony Richardson and CJ Stroud being better than anyone expected this quickly has sort of changed the calculation. So I think the Texans win that. And as far as the Panthers and the Detroit Lions, look, the Lions are one of the better teams in the league. I think at this point they're one of, say, 6 to 8 teams that probably have a legitimate shot at winning something. And the Panthers are a team that if they still had their first pick, they'd be in the running for Caleb Williams, who they wouldn't pick because they got Bryce Young, but whatever, you get the point.
Right.
So I expect the Lions to win that one pretty handily.
Yeah, I mean, I can't disagree with anything you said. Going back real quick to the Atlanta-Houston game, Desmond Ridder, I cannot believe, is still a quarterback in this league.
Starting.
A starting quarterback in this league.
Yeah.
I mean, I meant what I said, a quarterback in this league. But, that's appalling. But yeah, easily Houston and Detroit are the picks.
So, yeah, the Texans have done pretty good having an owner that ate paint chips as a kid. I got the reference.
Right.
Yeah.
So, Stroud's the real deal. They're going to move the football. Atlanta doesn't know how to get the ball into their best players' hands. They are tailor-made for a Kyler Murray type acquisition to take off, and I could see that happening. That's actually my pick for next year. I think he will be a Falcon if it's not Justin Fields. And then the Lions. In the year 2023, the Lions are 10-point favorites in a football game. What a time to be alive. I think they hit that. The Panthers, they're better than the 0-4 record would indicate. Adam Thielen,
solid.
Thielen's been a revelation for them. Sanders, if he's healthy, can do a little bit of work. The defense just can't stay healthy, and that's going to be part of their impediment. Oh, and by the way, Goff at home matters. Yeah. His home road splits are huge. So Lions are at home. It's a pretty good matchup for them.
Moving on to we'll do another two piece. The New York, the other New York team that is actually dreadful, Scott, the New York Giants, and the $40 million man that is Daniel Jones, who they decided to pay instead of Saquon Barkley. Daniel Jones and the New York Giants going up against the 70-point burger and Mike McDaniel led ball boy, formerly of the Denver Broncos, Miami Dolphins. The question isn't so much does Miami win. The question is this going to be another blowout that the Giants, see that as a suffering like they did against Dallas?
Start all your Miami players. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah, I think Brandon's right. Yeah, if you're a fantasy football guy, start all your Miami starters. Look, maybe the Giants keep this closer than we expect, but man, it's kind of wild. Like they were this close to having been absolutely blown out in all 4 of their games, right? Mm-hmm. Because they got destroyed by the Cowboys, they got destroyed by the 49ers, they got destroyed again by the Seahawks. They were getting destroyed by Arizona, and then my joke was that the ownership called down and said, "What are you doing? You're screwing up our plan. Why are you winning this game?" But they were down 28-7, so this has potential to get very, very ugly for the Giants. And the only thing I will say is this will be interesting for Daniel Jones because the Miami Dolphins defense is really not all that good. Although then again, the Seahawks were missing half their players on defense this week, and they still killed the Giants. So either way, I think the Dolphins win this one handily. The question, I think, is just, is Daniel Jones going to be as bad as he's been? Is the offensive line, more importantly, going to be as bad as they've been? By the way, guys, you want to hear a funny stat. The Giants, in their 2 home games so far this season, have been outscored 64-3.
Is that bad?
I'm told that's bad.
What about then the next one was Bengals and Cardinals. That one's going to be a bit interesting.
This is my spicy one.
You think the Cardinals are going to?
The Bengals have looked horrible, and the Cardinals have looked shockingly good.
Cardinals are only 3-point underdogs right now in that one.
Looks like we had some technical issues.
Yeah. We'll see.
I'm taking the Cardinals actually in this one. I know. I might regret it. But I think Jonathan Gannon kind of got something. He's got his killers that he looked for.
It'll be interesting to see. Like Dobbs actually has looked pretty good.
Yeah, surprisingly good. Michael Wilson looks legit. Hollywood Brown looks pretty good. James Conner looks very solid.
Reborn. What do you think, Scott? So we're going Bengals.
You missed my spicy pick. I took the
Cardinals
over the Bengals.
I kind of like that too. The Bengals are in big trouble right now. Joe Burrow, it's a double-edged sword because if he doesn't play, they feel like they have no chance. But if he does play, he just can't move. So I kind of like Arizona. They're spunky. I think everybody expected them to just roll over and play dead. But Josh Dobbs has played a lot better than people have have expected. And as you said, some of those young players, Michael Wilson has looked really good from Stanford. So I think that could be an interesting upset candidate.
Matty, you feel the same?
Joe cannot burrow himself in the pocket anymore. Like he's a sitting duck.
Dad jokes.
And I actually like the Cardinals to pull up the upset. Cardinals money line actually
Can't steal my spice. Just kidding.
Is one to put on there. So I like it a lot. There are a lot of games that I feel very strongly about. So naturally, I'm going to be wrong about all of them. But this is one that really feels the Cardinals are a team that feels like they're better than 1-3 indicates.
It would not be a real Manely Broncos podcast if there weren't at least dad jokes involved when Matty Mulls is on the pod. So the next game would be the Philadelphia Eagles and the Los Angeles Rams. So it would be Jalen Hurts against Puka Nacua Matata and Matt Stafford at quarterback. I'm going Eagles obviously on this one, but I wouldn't be surprised if the Rams kept it actually a lot closer than people think. And of course, Chiefs over Vikings.
Same both ways.
Yeah, I'm with that too. I think that makes a lot of sense. And by the way, I don't know, since you mentioned it, did you hear the call on that touchdown to what did he say? He said, Pakuna Matata, it means no worries, this game is over, or something like that. It's really corny. The only one that's cornier than that, I don't know if you guys have heard this, when the 49ers, so Greg Papa and Tim Ryan are their two announcers for the radio, and whenever Brandon Ayuk gets a touchdown, in stereo, they both go, Ayuk, Ayuk, Ayuk is on fire.
I like it.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
No, that's the thing dreams are made of. That's beautiful radio. I love it.
Matty, you got the same?
Yeah, I got Eagles over Rams. Between that game and the next one, they're the two highest projected scoring games on the slate for the week. So Eagles in a shootout, tush push is going to win it out. And then I have the Vikings at winning a must win at home over the Chiefs. They're going to have no answer for JJ and Hawkinson. Hawkinson's going to finally be able to tear them up in the middle.
Okay.
Yeah, that's my spicy take.
But will they be able to stop the Swifties?
It won't happen as swiftly
If they
as
stop
they
the
would like.
Swifties, I'll be a Vikings fan.
So I think Skull is going to take over the tomahawk chop in this one. But yeah, the Swifties. You know what? Maybe they break up after this. Maybe Travis realizes that he's not focusing on football enough. I don't know.
And they are never, ever, ever getting back together. By the way, that's the only Taylor Swift song I know.
Hopefully there's a blank space next to the W column for them this week.
We got to stop. Song titles in this show now.
And hopefully, if it is a loss,
we're not in the cult, guys.
And hopefully, if it is a loss, the Vikings, beat the Chiefs. The Chiefs can shake it off.
Shut up.
All right, enough of this. I don't want any. I don't want any.
San Francisco.
I don't want any bad blood here. And Carrie Underwood very much clears Taylor.
All right, what do we just start here?
All right, we're out of the woods yet, so let's go.
the best game of the weekend for sure is the rematch of an NFC Championship game: the Dallas Cowboys and the San Francisco 49ers. I have the 49ers. It feels like the Niners are maybe the best team in football right now, led by maybe the MVP of the league right now. And yes, that being number 23, Christian McCaffrey, who hails from Colorado and Valor Christian High School.
Yeah, I like the 49ers too, man. I'll let you go first, though, Brandon. Go ahead.
All right. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, man.
No, I agree. I picked the 49ers. It'll be interesting because of what's been going on with the Dallas defense, although they lost a pretty key piece of that. But I do think it's going to be San Francisco. Christian McCaffrey's just otherworldly.
Yeah, I think San Francisco is going to win. And it could go either way. I should say that. I think both of these teams, you could make a credible case they're the two best teams in the league right now, the two most complete teams. But I think the 49ers they're firing on all cylinders. And the 49er offensive line will be interesting to see if they can hold off what we've seen from this Cowboys defense, vice versa as well. But this to me, at least on paper, is the game of the season to this point. And it'll be interesting to see how Brock Purdy does too, because he's done pretty well this season so far. But now he's going to have, you would assume, some serious pressure coming at him. And arguably the best football player on earth in Micah Parsons to deal with. So this will be a fascinating game, but I think the 49ers take it.
So we all got 49ers. And then Matty,
I'm skipping me. That's the third time you tried to skip me. Quick question for the Jets guy. Micah Parsons, pretty good. Surprises no one.
I would
say
on
that somebody's scouting report.
I would say that leaving Dwayne Brown, a 38-year-old with coming off shoulder surgery, to go one-on-one with Parsons the whole game was probably not the best strategy by Nathaniel Hackett.
What about Trent Williams? Do you think he could handle him maybe a little bit better?
I mean, if anybody can, it would be Trent.
Yeah. I do like the 49ers. I like the transition going from Taylor Swift to Miss waiting all day for Sunday night, Carrie Underwood there in the comments. So the 49ers definitely going to win. I think they win because of a pick six by Dak, and then we're not going to be able to hear the end of it for a week on ESPN.
Oh, great.
God.
Packers and Raiders.
I'm just going to take the Packers. And I don't even know if there's much
it's a
analysis
Monday night
that
game,
needs to
by the
happen
way.
here. Yeah, Las Vegas. I mean, it could be a game. It could be an interesting game. I think they could get Josh Jacobs going again. Devontae Adams, because he left the game injured last week, and then he came back into the game. So I don't know like how big that injury is. But if they're going to be running out, is Aiden O'Connell, I think, is their rookie. Yeah, Aiden O'Connell. If they're going to run him out again, which I don't think the official report is out yet, but I think the Green Bay is going to take it.
Have any of you guys read the book Collision Low Crossers by any chance?
I have not, but I love cross references. So let's see where this goes. I'm excited.
Okay. So Collision Low Crossers, if you haven't read it, I recommend this to all football fans, Jets fans especially, but all football fans. Nicholas Dawidoff in 2011 had an all-access pass with the Jets. Like he got like coach-level access. Hasn't been done before. It wasn't done before. Hasn't been done since. And he wrote about his season with the New York Jets behind the scenes and all of that. And one of the funniest parts of the book is when he's at the scouting combine and all anybody would talk about is what an asshole Josh McDaniels is. And so I think about that every time I see McDaniels. And he's still you thought, oh, maybe he would have learned from the last time, but no, he seems to still be the same exact guy from his stint in Denver. And it makes me laugh every time he suffers in a football way. I don't want him to suffer personally, but I just think, look, he ran Derek Carr out of town because I guess Derek Carr wasn't his guy or he didn't want to run his offense or whatever it is. And Jimmy Garoppolo is the guy that he helped develop, but now, Jimmy Garoppolo is SAWFT soft, so he got hurt again. And then now you got Aiden O'Connell, who might be decent down the line. Who knows? He looked reasonably poised despite getting murdered by Khalil Mack. But then you got McDaniels coming out and throwing him under the bus and accusing him of being a turnover machine or not protecting the football. It's like, dude, he's a rookie making his first start.
Like, come on.
Yeah. Give me a break. And he was a late round pick on top of it. So same old Josh McDaniels, as Bill Parcells would say, always pointing the finger instead of pointing the thumb. So, they're a rough situation right now. I think the only reason McDaniels probably doesn't get fired is because Mark Davis doesn't want to pay him to not coach the team. And then you've got the Packers, who seem to be a bit of a mess. I mean, they were absolutely terrible on Thursday Night Football against the Lions, and Jordan Love, who I thought looked promising at the beginning, has started to really unravel. This is going to be a loser bowl, and I bet you that ESPN wishes they had a different game. But I'll go with the Packers here just because, I guess, lesser of two disasters.
What about you, Matty?
So, little revenge narrative for Devontae Adams here. He's getting peppered with targets. I do think Jimmy G is going to be back, right? He was on the fringe of potentially
if Jimmy
playing.
G's back, it's a bit different. Yeah.
I think Jimmy G is going to play.
He'll be hurt by halftime.
Okay. Maybe they've scored the 20 points needed to win this thing by then. But I think the Packers are going to figure it out. Getting Christian Watson back and him being a bigger part of that offense is going to be huge for them. I think Christian Watson's going to have a breakout game, potentially 100 yards and a touchdown. I like him for about 7 targets. And Aaron Jones hopefully will be a little more involved than what he was a couple nights ago. I lost a ton of money playing Aaron Jones. And he was like not involved at all. But this is going to be a very frustrating game score-wise. It's just I trust the coaching for Green Bay a lot more than I trust the coaching for the Raiders. And it's going to be in a good weather environment. So there's not going to be any of that craziness that can happen. And I'll take the better coaching and the better talent every time.
I'm pretty sure that the Raiders are still too cash poor to fire Josh McDaniels. Which is just the gift that keeps on giving.
What was the report that came out? Like they truly can't fire him.
They literally can't. They don't have the money to pay the rest of his salary and pay his replacement.
Yep.
And you have Packers.
It's hilarious.
You have Packers.
Packers.
Yeah. All right. That leaves us to the final score of the Broncos and Jets. Who do we have winning? And what could possibly be that final score prediction? And anybody that's in the chat, that are Jets fans, Bronco fans, feel free to chime in what you guys feel is the score of this game. So, Scott, you're our guest. We'll lead it off with you. Who wins and what is the score prediction?
This is a tough one. I'm going to say 20-17 Jets, and I think it could very easily go the opposite way. I don't know. I don't know what to make of this one, honestly. It was what we saw from Zach Wilson last week, a mirage. Are the Broncos coming out of their funk? Are they going to be able to score on that Jet defense? I don't know. I mean, this one really could go either way. I'll say 2017 Jets, but I could easily see it going the other way and being 2017 Broncos. But I don't think it's going to be a shootout or anything like that. I think you're looking at a score not all that dissimilar from what we saw between the Jets and the Chiefs. Final score there, if you recall, was 23-20. So I think 2017, one way or the other, is probably around where you're looking at.
Matty, what about you? We'll go with you second. Where do you have this game?
Broncos win 24-20. The over-under is at 43. That's like right there where the over-under is supposed to be. Broncos are 1.5 point favorites, according to that line I just saw. But the key, I think, is going to be, which Wilson's better. And I think Russell Wilson's going to make the plays that are necessary because he's thriving. And if I have to pick one guy to make a mistake right now, it's going to be the guy looking at Cougars in the third row. So I'm taking the Broncos 24-20.
And you don't mean BYU Cougars either.
You're right.
They might make the trip. They might make
true.
Pretty quick drive.
That's true.
But yeah.
That's fair.
Brandon?
Oh, man. I'm going 24-21 Denver. And the only reason I'm kind of sticking with that take here is I think it's going to be, again, I'm trying to come up with like the best way to use the unstoppable force meets movable object analogy, but it's going to be Zach Wilson against the worst defense in the league, or Russell Wilson against a good defense in the league, probably a top 5, top 10 defense in the league. I just think Russell Wilson comes out ahead, but I do think Zach Wilson's going to have another game. I'm scared to death of Breece Hall, so it could go the other way around. But I'm going 24.
Yeah. Funny enough, anybody that listened to the 5280 podcast yesterday, I actually said that exact same prediction. I said 24-21 Broncos, but like, and to what you said, Matty, like kind of like Justin Fields, to a certain degree, it's like you have to, he played out of his mind in the first half, right? He played out of his mind in the first half, but it's also Justin Fields, and at some point he's going to make that boneheaded play, right? And and I hate to bring it up, but Zach Wilson made the boneheaded play, against the Chiefs. It was the bad snap, and he admitted.
I feel bad for him because that video of him on the sideline going like, "I lost the game."
He was.
I hated that for him. He was playing awesome too.
He was playing awesome.
Yeah.
So, but I think that's sadly, but you have to say it's like sadly, that's exactly where Zach Wilson is. He may play really well, but it's really easy to bet on him making a really dumb play or two in the game. And I think that could cause the Broncos to win the turnover battle, which was one of the things that, I said is a key to the game. If they can win the turnover battle, I think that the Broncos have a really good shot at winning. I think hopefully, and I'm not, saying by any means that this is something that you're going to see, but hopefully the Broncos learned something in how they prepared against Justin Fields in that second half in terms of playing more man-to-man and really pressuring the daylights out of Justin Fields. And I think that they should try and adopt that exact same logic to Zach Wilson, make him beat you through the air. I'm definitely not confident in it, but, as apropos to the Aaron Rodgers injury, I'm far more confident than I was in this game now than I was, even before the season. But I'm still not overly confident. But I have Broncos 24-21.
Can we please, for the love of God, just put Patrick Surtain on Garrett Wilson and call it a day? Just shadow him, like from the locker room, even. Like, come on. Don't get cute.
Yeah. That'll actually do it for another episode of the Manely Broncos podcast. Scott, I want to say thank you so much. I know it went just a little bit of a tad long. We blame Taylor Swift. We blame Taylor Swift on this one. But again, thank you so much for hopping on with us. I know that we actually are going to be appearing on your podcast in terms of previewing the Broncos and Jets game. So anybody that's actually listening to this, if you guys feel free to wanting to listen to the Play Like a Jet podcast and get more of a in-depth analysis or, talk more about the Broncos versus Jets, we'll be on, that particular podcast. But I know I teased, obviously, the Play Like a Jet podcast, Scott, but why don't you let us know where people can follow you and check out your work?
Well, anywhere you download podcasts, Google, Spotify, Stitcher, Apple, on Twitter at PlayLikeAJet1. We have our store at tpublic.com. That's teepublic.com. Our YouTube channel, which has been cooking, youtube.com/PlayLikeAJet. The Thunder from Down Under, Australian, Luke Grant. He is the one who does all the great All-22 film reviews on there. So we should have something up on Zach Wilson's performance against the Chiefs. And, yeah, that's where you can find everything that's been going on with Play Like a Jet. I'm really looking forward to this game. I hope it's a good one, and I would like to see a very different outcome than I'm sure you guys would like to see at this point.
Sure.
But I do think it's a very interesting matchup for what you guys said. It's the irresistible force versus the immovable object. Zach Wilson versus the league's worst defense, and then resurgent Russell Wilson against the pretty good Jets defense. So this will be fun, and I'm looking forward to talking to you guys on my show and getting you guys to open up even more about the Broncos for the Jets audience who wants to learn more about what the Jets are facing on Sunday.
Absolutely. Any final thoughts for you guys, Brian and Matty?
I just can't wait to see all the bucket hats on the Jets sideline this week.
Bucket hats and
Oh
shades.
my God, yeah. I guess we'll see a sneak preview of this game on Saturday when CU takes on Arizona State.
Nice little
Pattern
call.
follows.
Yeah, nice little callback to the beginning of the show. You guys could follow Brandon at Brandon Miller PO, Matty at Matty Mulls Pod. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the podcast. Myself at Cameron Parker PO. Again, thank you guys so much, and stay tuned for another episode of the Manely Broncos Podcast next week.
Even when you feel low, you can still go. Even when you feel slow, you can still go. Even when there's no hope, you can still go. I never answer to no, man, I still go. Go, 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 yeah, go, go, go. Hustle hard, hustle every single day. I'll be making moves till I'm buried